Hello viewers, welcome to another segment of Know Your Neighbor from CR Park Speaks. So today we have with us Professor Sreeradha Datta, who teaches International Affairs at O.P Jindal Global University presently. She is also a non-resident senior fellow with Institute of South Indian Studies, National University of Singapore. She has also served as director, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad Institute of Asian Studies, Kolkata, Government of India, and has held fellowships with Institute for Defence Studies and Analyses, New Delhi, Government of India. She holds a Ph.D. from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. She has authored and edited over 10 books, including her latest edited volume, Bangladesh on a New Journey, Moving Beyond Regional Identity. Her research interests include areas studies, South Asia and India's extended neighbourhood, Southeast Asia and Indo-Pacific, including the Bay of Bengal. She is on the board of academic journals and university boards. I am Anindita Roy, my co-editor JRA, Professor Sreeradha Dutta. Over to you, Joya.
Thank you, Anindita. So, viewers, welcome to another very interesting episode of Know Your Neighbors. Today we have a cerebral guest with us, and as you've heard, she's got an endless resume to her credit, and we can't just seem to get over that. So, welcome, Sreeradha. Great to have you on our podcast.
Thank you.
And really, I mean, it's an honor to speak with such a luminary as yourself, with such an extensive experience on geopolitics, on academia, and what all that we can talk about. So today's I think we'll just have a very basic understanding. I mean, of course, for the benefit of the entire audience, because Bangladesh has always had a very interesting, I think, place in India's psyche and India's thought process. So we wanted to know from you, Sreeradha, how did Bangladesh figure in your scheme of things, your academics or your research? How did that happen?
So, as a student of politics, I've always had interest in the regional studies, which is South Asia. So, when I started working with Institute for Defence Studies, my project was essentially the Northeast first and the region. And over time, I was also looking at the neighborhood because of my interest. But because I knew the language, there was a particular occasion when I needed to read something in Bengali, and there was nobody else really focusing on Bangladesh so much at that institute, and it was a kind of a natural, seamless, movement towards that. But over time, and one of the first books that I wrote, and again in terms of the CV profile that you said, is part of the occupational hazard. If you don't publish, you perish in our line of work. So my first book on Bangladesh was known as A Fragile Democracy. And I keep going back to that. I mean, even if we today speak about Bangladesh, it's still going to be a fragile democracy.
Correct.
So, and that I think was the first time that somebody from India had looked at it in a little more focused manner. But I must say that when I started working on, and every time you write a book, you have to have the project,
Right.
through the council. And I remember some of the very well-known established former diplomats, strategic thinkers in India telling me, what are you going to write about Bangladesh? The problem in India is everybody knows Bangladesh and everybody thinks they understand Bangladesh. So how will you be any different from them? And I think that really kind of...
The fact is that we really don't know Bangladesh.
But we just have a familiarity.
Yeah,
That it is something that, we all know, it's our neighbor and the history and all of that. But I think I really kind of started taking a much deeper interest, and because the book was very well appreciated, I must say, here in India and in Bangladesh. And I was invited to speak about it and, discuss many of the issues that are raised and kind of highlighted in the book. And subsequently, of course, I've continued to work on the region. I work on regionalism, as you know. I've worked on BIMSTEC and other. I continue to work a lot on the Northeast. But I time and again keep going back to Bangladesh.
That's become sort of a very soft spot for you, I guess. And since you have now acquired so much of knowledge, because we perceive to know the country, but I don't think we do.
Yes, also I have to, and I think it's true for so many of us, I had a family link in the sense my parents, my in-laws, all were from there. So
Right.
on my early visits, I did go see the house and the location. My father and my mother subsequently went back to see his school. My grandfather was a professor in their university, which is now one of the main engineering universities there. So of course the family link helps, and whenever a Bangladeshi gets to know that you have a family, they kind of really open the door for you. And I've had, despite the fact that there are many issues we don't agree on academically, but they've really opened their home and house for me. So that's also another reason why I keep going back.
I have never been able to visit that place, but although my father was from Jasor.
Oh yes, of course.
Most of us in CR Park do have
some
lineage.
links. I mean, this house was all about that, right? This
Correct.
location,
Right.
this
Exactly.
displaced population.
Right. So, Sreeradha, we wanted to know, like, that's very interesting that I think what we were just discussing a while ago, that geopolitics business has a very strong role to play in the economy of the country. So, we want to really know from you, how does that, fit into a scheme of things in the current scenario of the country, according to you?
For Bangladesh, you're saying. So Bangladesh, as you know, when it began the 71 liberation war, it was a very weak economic country at that time. Of course, politically it was in disarray. And I think Bangabandhu Mujibur Rahman, of course, it was a challenge for him to, put it all together, to kind of unfold a cohesive policy. And we also know the issues that subsequently he faced, and of course his assassination. But Bangladesh at that point of time was written by, was kind of written off by Henry Kissinger, who went public and said that it's a basket case. From that to a place maybe 3 years ago, Bangladesh was one of the fastest growing nation in Asia. So clearly there has been a huge upward trajectory in terms of their human index development indicators. They've done fabulously well, even compared to India. The poverty alleviation program, they're the only probably Muslim nation which has been able to, roll back their population numbers, their child enrollment, and not only child enrollment, the other indicator that we often look at is how many children enrolled and how many stayed back till they were 14 years old, which is also highest in Bangladesh. Wow. So much of that was improving, and of course their growth story has been impinged a lot, and I have written several times about this, that it was not a very top-down controlled approach. They let the spirit of entrepreneurship kind of come awake, and we now see in the world the largest ready-made garment industry is actually from Bangladesh, which is why they look, Europe and American markets are so important. And while this was happening, on the other side, in the terms of the geopolitics, you see Indo-Pacific is suddenly assuming a significance which we hadn't heard of 2 decades ago. So now we suddenly see Indo-Pacific, and which is also related to Bay of Bengal because it's right there at the cusp, becoming very important, which is why India also emerged as an extremely significant player for the developed world. Bangladesh similarly became a kind of in the geopolitical scenario, which the latest book of mine talks about, how it's now been examined through a very different lens. Earlier, it was one small South Asian nation with a teeming population, who cares about it? But the markets were growing, so people's buying capacity was growing. They were becoming, pretty robust. Also, they have a extremely, their remittance has contributed very well towards Bangladesh's economy. Across we see how Bangladeshis have actually used the Indian curry to put up hotels and these mom and pop stores and these chain of restaurants that they're running all over UK especially and other places. So clearly there was, but of course there was a particular way used to look at Bangladesh, which is now changed because it's a different Bangladesh. But right now, as we speak, just now Bangladesh is going through political instability. So let's hope. I'm very upbeat, and I think Bangladesh will find its feet again, and there will be stable growth all over again, peace and growth.
When we talk about the RMG industry, there have been a lot of stories around the world that they are using child labor very unethically and things like that. So, what has been your study on that, Sreeradha?
So yes, that was a problem initially, but there are two things which has emerged. See, as I mentioned, these government is basically directed to Europe and America, and many of the buyers. And though in my course of work I don't meet them, but in the hotel I often come into them and I go out of way to speak to them. They have extremely stringent conditions about what the factories should be like. It is not to say that the labor conditions are great. They still have non-hygienic conditions. The labor in terms of wages very low, but child labor has been addressed to some extent. It's not 100%, but at least they've been able to deal with much of this. Also, now that Bangladesh is taking loans from both IMF and World Bank, and so these multilateral organizations also have certain conditions as part of
Working
the
conditions.
so which is what Bangladesh has to adhere to. And while it's true that most of the ready-made garment industry, which is now also going through a bit of a bleak period, was because most of the owners were Awami League association. Groups and families who fled the country.
Right.
So they were workers out on the road for months without wages. So the government actually addressed that very well, this particular interim government.
The current interim
Government. So right now orders have started pouring in again, and things are looking up. But while everything like the workers, I think about 2 years ago, were out of the streets for a longish period demanding better working conditions, better wages, which is why we've also seen this is the industry which employs over 90% women in a 7 million workforce. So that's a lot of, but women were stepping back because they were very unhappy with the working conditions and long work hours. So which the owners really didn't address, despite a government committee, suggesting that they should. So problems remain, but at the same time that industry is still looking
But basically, because of the cheap labor, that's why the European and the USA countries they
exactly
open up there.
Yeah,
because they are getting cheap labor.
They are able to produce a particular garment at a lower price because of the cheap labor and the other factors. Yes. So that is another issue, and a normal factory, depending on the space, would probably have 6 people working. Here in Bangladesh, you have 10 people working. So that is those kind of issues which continue to remain there. But in the region, again, laborers in Bangladesh are.
But do you think like if they increase the labor cost, then maybe they won't get those orders?
No, it's not that. I think the profit margin for the owners will probably
profit
dim a
margin for
little bit.
the
And the big houses in Bangladesh are very, very rich and powerful politically. It goes side by side. So I just think maybe the profit margin could be re-examined a little bit, and the
better working conditions.
Yes. I think
that balance has to be
profit sharing with the laborers.
Exactly.
The people who are actually working,
producing the
product for you. Because without them,
there will be no factory.
There is no factory.
Exactly.
So a labor policy, a more intensive labor intensive policy has to be.
I mean, on paper there exists everything, but in terms of implementation, and because as I said, most of these families have links with the political party, so there's a certain influence that works. So the government is not able to impose very strictly, these laws.
Do they run the economy like these business houses? Do you think?
Yes, it really was the case till July this last year, when you actually saw one particular family who owned 7 banks.
Wow.
And they borrowed from the Central Bank of Bangladesh, and then amongst each other borrowed and loan.
Right.
And finally you see the entire money there's been a flight of some, I don't even know the numbers, of 15 billion or much more. The whole money has just gone away from Bangladesh.
So they have fled the country.
Yes, so now of course this interim government keeps examining it and saying that we're going to try and bring it back. But these are very, very difficult, complex issues. But it's true that people, the big families, the powerful, rich families did use their space to leverage a lot of, I would say, untoward benefits for themselves at the cost of common people.
Is it more because there have been, like you had mentioned a while ago, that the government had a free reign for business. So was there like lack of control, or what could have?
I mean, there is I won't say lack of control, because there are ministries who work pretty well. The organized sector. It was as if I'm saying the entrepreneurship really grew from the ground. It wasn't like a imposed from the top that you do this, you do this. So people suddenly realized this is a huge vacuum. So let's put in some money and see. So that's how it all began. It was actually, I remember, an Air Force officer who first started the first RMG factory was set by him. And it's now grown in multiples and that kind of a thing. So what they did was enable was a very good working condition. In the sense that the usual strictures of paperwork and all that was made easy so that that spirit remained. Yes, and also the NGO sector also worked closely. So there are many other factors which contributed to the free space for these entrepreneurs. But it's true what you're saying is that the government should have controlled it better, should have imposed whatever laws that exist in the country better. But in Bangladesh, everything is very politically charged, and this is true for every government. It is Awami that we are talking about, but even when BNP was in power, we've also seen in Bangladesh that most retired military officers are given some kind of a commercial activity, some factories to run something. So they all become part of this entrenched system, which is pretty corrupt.
And I think again, like you said, that it's pretty corrupt because I think maybe because of their, the policies are not very tightly entrenched, and there are
not implemented very strictly. Yes, enforcement is an issue. And also we've seen in Bangladesh a problem that we see in South Asia everywhere is that the strict division of organization entities is not maintained. So then suddenly you find the PMO's office having a far larger level of influence on many of these aspects of economy and growth, which has affected the country, and which is why today they are in this particular.
Maybe it's a little immature. I think the level of politics is a little geopolitics, a little immature. What do you say? I think that's what
I think corruption is the main factor.
Yeah.
I think they know it all. It's not that they're unaware of the situation, but they want to just leverage and extract as much as they can for their own benefit and not distribute it to, as Anita mentioned, the laborers are working for it, right? They are the ones who are actually building that commodity. But
because if they stop working, if they don't have that skill, then what will you sell?
Exactly.
You are basically selling their skill.
Exactly.
I think that is what the maturity of a country's the politics is, where you are able to really put down on paper and implement them.
That's right.
What
laws have to be enforced.
And to take care of the artisans, those laws should be in place so that the artisans are taken care of.
Yeah, so it is essentially a systemic problem.
Correct, systemic problem. What do you foresee, Sreeradha? Very interestingly, I mean, we are all very eager to know. Looking at the current geopolitics scenario in Bangladesh and the kind of upheaval that is going through, what is the future hold for the country?
Just now, it does look difficult because there are too many different constituencies voicing their opinions which are not in cohesion really. We also find, and I think that's another point of interest from India, that we find a lot of strong right voices. So Islamist voices, Islamic groups, political parties, suddenly who surfaced and find that very, very, we look at it clearly through a very negative prism. But my little understanding of Bangladesh tells me that Bangladesh will not tolerate this also. It is certainly a Muslim majority country, but they are not fundamentalists by nature. They
were not fundamentalists, but now some people are trying to make them.
Yes, so what happens is the negative elements are voicing their their point of view very loudly, but the moderate section, the other sections naturally don't appear at this particular point. But again, I hope that Bangladesh will go in for elections soon, end of the year or early next year. And once election happens, things will stabilize, because again, Bangladesh, while there has been Islamic political parties post-75, we've seen they've never had much of electoral strength.
Yeah, correct.
And I do believe that there may be a bit of difference now. They will increase their strength, but not to the extent of upsetting the entire political landscape. So another elected political party will come in who is also most capable of doing exactly what the previous government did. I don't think politically they have matured. That's my take on Bangladesh really. But at least an elected government with certain rules of norms and standard in place will certainly stabilize it. I mean, as I said, Redwood government orders are coming in, remittances flowing in again because of the corrupt system of the banking sector, which was in a mess. Remittance had stopped flowing; they were only coming through the informal channel. Because of these problems. So I think the economy has to be dealt with. Serious reforms are being discussed. Yes, there are being various aspects of various reforms, electoral or other social, constitutional reforms. So slowly and steadily, beginning with electoral reform, which is required to hold a free and fair election, and majority of people are saying they need multi-party elections. Otherwise, they have to be different from what the previous government did. So to do that, they'll have to have
becomes a sort of a pseudo dictatorship.
Yes, which we see in the last 10, 12, 15 years. Exactly. So they have to break away from that. But in Bangladesh, let me again, remind all of us that political leaders in Bangladesh, by nature, are very autocratic.
Yeah, they are.
We've seen that, the dynastic politics, and I hope there's a talk of new political party being launched by the students. I sincerely hope they should come in, because the dynastic binary that we see in Bangladesh, where it's very family-led politics, this has to be
because the country was born out of that, so you can't blame that. And
actually, no, I actually differ here. It is a narrative that Awami League built. Oh, there were many other well-known leaders like Atajuddin Ahmed and many other, including some very strong left-oriented leaders who were really marginalized by Mujibur Rahman, which is something again the students are talking about.
So, which means that
history was rewritten through a particular perspective that was not necessarily the nation's perspective.
So it was more of a coup of sorts that happened at that time, when they actually got the support from India, and they probably just thought that this is an opportunity for us to really, take on the reins of the
exactly,
country.
But also not recognize the other players. See, of course, Mujibur Rahman was a very strong player, and he certainly led he was in jail, of course, before that at that point of time. But there were many others who were actively part of the liberation, war, and also part of the nation building process that happened. But I think there was a tendency within Mujibur Rahman and Awami League to take all the limelight for himself, which is a question which is now out again. And students are constantly grappling that we don't want to go back to a Bangladesh which was a repeat of that one particular family or dynasty captures the entire political space.
Very similar to what India was going through pre-independence, and then of course we also had a dynastic binary in India. It's very similar to that. But who do you think will come in? I mean, which party do you think?
At this point of time, the choices are limited because the only other majority party in Bangladesh is BNP, which is Ziaur Rahman's party, now led by Khalida Zia, who's physically unwell. But there's some very strong leaders in Bangladesh. Her own son it still remains outside Bangladesh in London because he's got several charges that have been labelled against him. Some of the charges have been dismissed by the court because he's been away for years that he's been able to serve the sentence maybe. But there are strong
contenders,
BNP leaders,
other contenders.
Yes. So whether it's going to be given to the son to now take this forward, or whether the general secretary is a very well-known established politician, and many others who've held important cabinets earlier, ministerial berths. So BNP looks like a strong contender for this. There are many other smaller parties. Jatiya Party is also, which was established by one of the former Bangladeshi presidents, Ershad. His son and wife now hold the two reins of the political party. They've never had a very large popular appeal beyond Rangpur, which is their own district. So let's see. Also, the religious political party, as I said, making a
comeback.
Yes, in between they were not very popular. They are making a lot of noises, strong noises, unpopular noises, also very anti-woman policies. Some of them have undertaken, and that I think is what is going to be the deciding factor, because Bangladesh's women are extremely strong, independent constituency, and they will not, give in to something which looks so subversive.
And also there are a lot of matriarchs, from my brief study, I've seen many business houses have matriarchs who are pioneering the business.
Yes. As I said, in the garment industry, 90% of the workers are women force. There's a bit of a dent just now, but even today, the majority of the workers in the ready-made garment industry. So clearly, the independent, they have a voice in their own family and in the society. And they, I don't think, will give in very easily to some of these what Islamic groups are advocating.
And you're also talking about students' parties which are coming up, and they might also be contending for during the multi-party elections.
Yes, but I think it's too early for them to be able to get any kind of. They'll probably form it soon. I think they've announced it, but I'm not sure people will vote for them immediately because clearly there's no track record to show.
Yes.
What have they done? I say. So but I just feel alternative political parties in Bangladesh is a good way. They should have other choices opening up because otherwise it's Jatiya Party who's in a coalition with somebody else, Jamaat. Again, Jamaat Islamic Political Party was always in coalition BNP or has supported Awami in some instance. So choices have been very limited.
So another thing, we know that you also teach in a college, the international affairs. So tell us about that life of yours and how do the students of our country respond to the whole situation?
I really enjoy it. It's a little less than 3 years that I've been teaching there now, and it's that youth vibrancy is so much in the classroom, and I've really, in fact, quite funny that all these years that I've been teaching, and I've also taught earlier, but that's never full time. This is now a full time occupation for me. I've never taught a course in Bangladesh. So this time, because Bangladesh, the situation was unfolding, my book got released early 2024. So we did series of book round discussions. It was launched by the Bangladeshi government, and then we did a lot of series in Delhi, in the university, and elsewhere. So students' interest was really ignited, and they would literally walk into my class, say, "Give us an update. What is happening?" Students who had taught earlier. So then they said, "Please offer a course in Bangladesh." So this is the first time I'm actually offering a course in Bangladesh.
That's amazing.
Yes, and I have a lot of. I also teach Northeast as a region that's on some issue-based things, and a lot of students from the Northeast come for these classes, which I'm so happy about. And I really enjoy my time in the classroom. So I'm very happy with this new change of my working life.
Excellent, excellent. It was such a wonderful discussion. I didn't realize that we would enjoy a discussion on Bangladesh so much, but it was, it was extremely cerebral, extremely interesting, invigorating, and thank you so much, Sreeradha, for honoring us with this enlightening discussion. I'm sure you all have enjoyed as much as we did talking to her and getting to know our neighboring country from a different light altogether. So thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. We'll see you in our next one.